All right, what we're working with today is adding and subtracting fractions. And so first of all, we have to understand what you have to have. And the first thing you need is you have to have a common denominator. And so if I have fractions that have a 5 and a 3, what I have to focus on is making my denominator, the bottom number, the same. And remember, that's getting finding a multiple that both of them go into. We've done a lot of this, and so 5 times 3 is 15, so 15 would work. So we're working with a lot of equivalent fractions. Once you have a common denominator, you add or subtract the numerator. And remember, that's the top number. And then the bottom, the denominator, stays the same. A common mistake that I'll see is that people will make the bottom a 30. This is not correct. Oops. This is not correct. Okay? The denominator stays the same at 15. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some problems. So the first one I like to write them vertically, is 1/4 and 2/3. So I have to find a number that goes into 4, or 3 and 4 both go into. And the smallest number I can think of is 12. And if you're ever not sure, you can multiply them, and that will always work. So to get from 4 to 12, I had to multiply by 3. So that means I have to multiply the top by 3. So 3 times 1 is 3. To get from 3 to 12, I had to multiply by 4. So remember, whatever you do to the bottom, you also do to the top. And so 2 times 4 is 8. Now I have a common denominator. I figured out what my equivalent fractions and my numerators are, so I'm going to add them. 3 plus 8 is 11. And so my answer is 11/12. I can't reduce it. It's a proper fraction, so we're good with that answer. All right, over here, when you have a minus, it's the same idea. First thing you have to do is find a common denominator. Well, the smallest number that 5 and 3 both go into is 15. And again, if you don't remember, you just multiply them, and that will work also. So to get from 5 to 15, I times by 3. So that means I have to times the top by 3. And 3 times 4 is 12. To get from 3 to 15, I multiplied by 5. So if you multiply the bottom by 5, you have to multiply the top by 5, and I get 10. Now my numerators are done. I found equivalent fractions. My denominators are the same, so I can actually just subtract this. 12 minus 10 is 2. My denominator stays the same at 15, and that cannot be reduced, and so that is our answer. All right, so now we also have ones that have whole numbers in front, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of highlight those, and we're going to come back to those at the end. What I want us to do is I want us just to focus on the smaller fractions, so I need to look at 4 and 6. Now, if you recognize the smallest number that goes into 4 and 6, you could do that. If not, you can also do 4 times 6, which is 24. Now, with this one, I will tell you there's a smaller number that they both go into, and so you'll have to reduce at the end. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do the easier way because I know my 4s and 6s, and the first number that goes into them both, or that they both go into, is 12. So to get from 4 to 12, I times by 3, so that means I have to times the top by 3, and I get 9. To get from 6 to 12, I times by 2, so I have to multiply the top by 2, so I get 10. So I have common denominators, so I can add my numerators, and 9 plus 10 is 19. Now this is an improper fraction, which we can't have, so I need to make it a mixed number. 12 goes into 19 one time, and then to find out how many are left, I'm going to subtract, and I get 7. Now, I would be done, but do you remember these? We had these whole numbers up front. Now we need to take care of these. So 2 plus 1 is 3. So I need to add 3 here. Well, I add my big numbers. 1 plus 3 is 4. So it's 4 and 7/12. And that's the final answer. And you can't reduce 7/12, so we're done. Okay. All right, I'm going to see if I can move this one over some. It's kind of got out of the way. Move it over that way. There we go. That gives me more space. Okay, so let's look at this one. Same thing again. I have whole numbers, so I'm going to ignore those till the end. And I'm going to start off by getting a common denominator between 10 and 4. Again, if you're not sure, you would just multiply them and you can use 40. But there's a smaller number, and that's 20. So to get from 10 to 20, I times by 2, so I have to times the top by 2, so I get 18. To get from 4 to 20, I times by 5, so I have to times the top by 5, and I get 15. Common denominators, I wrote equivalent fractions so I could subtract. 18 minus 15 is 3. There's nothing I can do with this fraction, but I do have to remember to come look at my whole numbers I had. And the whole numbers are saying 3 minus 2. Well, 3 minus 2 is 1. And so that is my answer. All right, so now here's some examples on the screen. What would be best is if you try them and then come back and hit play when you think you have it. All right, well, welcome back. Hopefully you gave them a try. So the first one I have is 20. So I multiplied the 4 by 5, so I multiplied by onto the top by 5 also. And then 5 I multiplied by 4, so I multiply the top by 4 also. And so I get 9 over 20. There's not a number that goes into both of those, so that is my answer. All right, for number 4, and yeah, I'm going to go out of order here, but that's okay. My common denominator between 5 and 3 is 15. So I multiplied by 3, so I multiply the top by 3, and I get 6. I multiply by 5, and I get 10. 6 plus 10 is 16. And if you notice, the numerator is too big. This is an improper fraction, so I want you to make it a mixed number. 15 goes into 16 one time with 1 remaining. And so that is our answer. All right, looking at number 2, another 3 and 5. So that's nice. We know that common denominator, 15. And I multiplied my 3 by 5. So again, whatever you multiply the bottom by, the top has to be multiplied by. And on the right, I multiply by 3, so I get 9. Common denominators, I made equivalent fractions, so now I can just do the math. 10 minus 9 is 1, so it's 1 over 15, and you cannot reduce that. All right, for number 5, remember I like to kind of ignore the whole numbers until the end. And so now I need to make my common denominator. 2 and 3. Well, remember, you can multiply them and get 6, so my common denominator is 6. I multiplied 2 by 3, so I have to multiply the top by 3. And I multiplied 3 by 2, so I have to multiply the top by 2. When I add these together, I get 5 over 6, and now I have to look at those whole numbers. And 2 plus 4 is 6. So it's 6 and 5, 6, and that's the answer. All right, last 2 problems again. If you want to take the time to go ahead and try them on your own, and then press play when you think you have it and you're ready to check your answers. All right, so for number 3, you could multiply these and get 32, but there's other options too. Both of those numbers both go into 24. They both go into 16, and they both go into 8. If you don't want to worry about reducing, choose the lowest number. If you don't recognize the multiples, then just multiply them, and it'll work. You'll just have to reduce it at the end. So for this first one, I didn't really do anything. I just multiplied by 1. Hold on. I just multiplied by 1, and so it stays the same. Over here, I had to multiply by 2, so I get 6. So 7 8 minus 6 8 is 1 8. And we're done because there's nothing to reduce. Over here, another 4, 5, and 3, so we know that. We've had a lot of those. 15, so I multiplied the 5 by 3, so I get a 12 on top. And I multiplied the right one by 5, so I get a 10 on top for that one. I have common denominators. I made equivalent fractions, so I can add 12 plus 10 is 22. And remember, I don't want improper fractions. 15 goes into 22 one time. And then to find my remainder, I'm going to subtract. And so it's 7. And there's your answer. So the keys you have to remember for adding and subtracting fractions are right up here. Remember that you need to have a common denominator. You add or subtract the top, and then the bottom number stays the same.